Groups that provide services to people with developmental disabilities are concerned about funding at a time when some have lost millions of dollars due to the pandemic. Capitol Tonight's Nick Reisman spoke to one of these organizations about what this means for them as they move forward.
Organizations that provide services to people with developmental disabilities in New York are facing a potentially difficult budget season after several years of spending reductions across the board. I spoke recently with Eric Geiser of the New York Arc about the impact the state budget could be having on people who are the most vulnerable in New York. What would you say is the biggest issue facing people who provide programs and services to those with developmental disabilities in New York?
We are looking at the past 10 years where we have not had a cost of living adjustment for our field. Imagine, if you will, working at a job 10 years ago and still being paid the same thing today. And that's essentially what we're trying to face. We estimate that that's cost our field about $5 billion in funding. Add to that the COVID crisis, which has cost us hundreds of millions of dollars in unfunded costs that we did not anticipate. And then on top of everything else, of course, you add on the budget cuts, which is several hundred more million dollars, and you have a real recipe for disaster.
Has that affected your ability to retain workers who are, I would imagine, are working in a pretty challenging field?
Unfortunately, we are competing with non-human service sector fields. The wages that we're able to pay our direct workforce is minimum wage, sometimes just marginally over minimum wage. So we're competing with fast food restaurants, with Walmarts, Targets, and some of that work can be much less difficult than the very challenging work our direct care workforce has on their hands.
How much will your budgets hinge on a major stimulus package from the federal government?
We are actually looking for more federal support. There have been some who have suggested that we could see up to $15 billion in federal support. If we were able to have that sort of victory, that would, we hope anyway, that would result in many of these cuts being completely eliminated and allowing us to invest into our programs, our services, and of course the workforce and their salaries.
Money withheld from some of these organizations has been partially restored, but they still face cuts of up to 5% unless Congress restores up to $15 billion in aid to New York. At the Capitol, Nick Reisman, Spectrum News.
Well, we